Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This first story was created in 2020 by a user named Choice Evidence 1983 in the Relationship Advice subreddit. The post is titled, I am 27F and my husband, 24M, is cheating on me with his brother. English isn't my first language, so I apologize for any mistakes. Obviously, this is a throwaway. Okay, so this sounds crazy and I know it. But let me explain. The last 24 hours or so have been pure hell for me and I'm tired. I cry constantly. As background, we've been married for 5 years and together for 8. We have been in an open relationship for 3 years. We're both bisexual and I'm more than happy that he can explore that side of himself with other men, just as I can do the same with women. We have rules though. We've agreed that we're going to tell each other when we hook up with other people. Now, to the story. A week ago, I drove several hours to see my sick mother in Kortrijk. I left my husband at home since he was working from home and couldn't come with me. Also, my mother dislikes him because he's a foreigner. I texted Marcus to wish him a happy birthday, but he didn't reply. I thought he was out drinking and didn't think much of it. However, I came back a day earlier, yesterday, than planned, intending to surprise my husband. I entered our house and heard noises. I was confused because my husband hadn't told me that he was going to see someone. I kind of brushed it off, thinking it was just him pleasuring himself and watching. All was good. 20 to 30 minutes later, my husband came downstairs, saw me, and went pale. I mean, white as a ghost. He stared at me, stammered, and looked guilty. At that point, I thought, there's something up. Not 2 minutes later, his brother came downstairs and he had a hickey, well, several on his neck. He greeted me stiffly and said that he had to run back home to his girlfriend. My husband didn't acknowledge Marcus leaving, which was unusual since they usually hug and linger. They're very close and have always been ever since I met my husband about 10 years ago. What was that about? I asked my husband. He was very evasive, dodging the question and saying that they had a row. I pressed on the matter, asking what they fought about. Nothing, he told me, now irritated. I kept pressing. He finally relented, saying that Marcus cheated on his girlfriend and that the woman he cheated with escaped through the window. We have a one-story house, so it's kind of plausible when they heard my car. I was suspicious, but I assumed he was lying about the car thing and that he'd seen or heard me in the house and alerted his brother and his mistress. Marcus cheating on his girlfriend is not fine with me. His girlfriend is my friend too, and she's amazing, working on the front lines of this pandemic. My husband told me he had to do some work and that he had a client, which was actually true, so he wasn't lying about that. I was still a bit weirded out by the whole thing. Marcus lives alone, so why was he hooking up with some random woman in our home? Later last night, I felt like something was off. Normally, my husband would be very excited that I'm home, and every time I've been somewhere, he's been very romantic and initiated sex. Now, nothing. He's very quiet, reserved, and nervous. When my husband took a shower, I went after him to wash my face and noticed that he too had hickeys on his chest that he tried to cover up when he saw me. I felt sick to my stomach and decided to go through his phone. Yeah, I know, I shouldn't have done that. I was 100% sure he had a guy over too. I was still reading the conversations between him and his brother when my husband came out of the shower. The conversations were explicit. The reality hit me like a ton of bricks. I asked my husband what was going on and why he was flirting with Marcus. He told me it was a joke, just joking between brothers, and it sometimes goes too far. I didn't buy it. I went to sleep because I was exhausted from the trip. I was woken in the middle of the night by my husband crying his eyes out in our living room. So I went to ask what was wrong and he told me everything. How he has an on-off relationship with his brother. They started having sex over 10 years ago. First it was mutual masturbation, and then it just escalated into sex. He says it was because of their religious upbringing and that he knew nothing about sex or sexuality until we started dating. My husband and Marcus are not in contact with their parents. They had a falling out about 6 years ago, and I was told it was because Marcus was dating a person of color back then. Well, now I'm thinking they got caught, and that's why their parents disowned them. Now I haven't slept since that night, and I don't know what to do. I can't look at my husband, and I don't know if I should tell Marcus's girlfriend about all this or what. I want to leave my husband, but at the same time, I don't. Should I contact their parents and ask what really happened 6 years ago? Is this something a therapist could handle? Is our relationship salvageable? Cheating is not something I'd break up over, but I can't shake the slimy feeling I have. My husband had sex with his brother, and yes, they have the same parents, so they're not stepbrothers or anything. Of course, I've been thinking about the relationship my husband and Marcus had when they were younger. Like I said, they have always been very, very close. But I should have seen the red flags. I should have known. Something weird happened just before we started dating, and now I'm thinking it wasn't as innocent as it seemed back then. I'm lost. I'm confused. I don't know what to do. I can't talk about this to my friends or my parents. I'm starting to think about killing myself so I wouldn't feel this way. I'm making one small update now, and I'll return sometime tomorrow. A few things have happened now. I asked Marcus's girlfriend to come and see me later today. It's nearly 1 a.m. here currently. She agreed and said, "I think I know what's going on." My husband said he's not coming home. He tells me he's at a friend's house, but I know he's not there because I contacted said friend. I'm assuming he's at Marcus's place. I'll contact a therapist first thing Monday. I have written an email and I'll send it early Monday morning. My husband told me a bit more, but he claims it all started from him. I don't believe it. I think he's lying to protect his brother. Marcus left me a voicemail saying that he can explain the situation. He did explain it, telling that it was this one time only, but he didn't know that my husband had already told me that it has been going on over 10 years. It all started when my husband had just turned and came out as bisexual. I feel very sad and angry. I almost drove to Marcus's house because I wanted to yell at him. For those claiming my husband is gay, it's not true. He came out before anything happened with Marcus. I texted their parents and said I wanted to talk with them and said that something bad happened, but their boys were all right. I'm not all right. I asked a friend to come to our house an hour ago and I showed this post to her. She's very angry and says that we have to get my husband to therapy like some of you kind souls told me. Thank you everyone. I'll answer your comments when I've rested. I need sleep and food. About 2.5 months later, OP provided us with an update. First of all, thank you everyone for your comments. Second, I'm sorry this took so long. I have been extremely depressed lately, unable to even go to work. I was laid off due to COVID, although I know it's because of this situation. In late July, after I posted my original post, I contacted a therapist and got treatment for my husband. I decided not to file for divorce. I also told Marcus's girlfriend what had happened. She knew already, which was such a betrayal in my opinion. We are no longer friends and I haven't seen Marcus since July. Unfortunately, in the middle of August, my husband committed. I am writing this depressed, lonely, and so angry. Law is clear in situations like this. Consensual incest is okay, so there's nothing I can do anymore. My husband died and his secrets and the truth died with him. There's no evidence that Marcus ever raped him, even though that is what my husband told me. He didn't get a chance to tell his therapist. I'm alone. So alone. All my friends have left me because they think this was somehow my fault. My husband's parents are not happy. I wrote in my previous post that I was thinking my husband and Marcus got caught. They did. Their parents told me as much. I don't know what else to say. Thank you for the kind words and support I got. I wish things had gone differently. Then after another 3 years, OP gave us yet another update. July 2020. Seems so far away now after everything. August 2020 is when my husband unfortunately decided to end his life. October 2020 is when I last wrote an update. It's been well over 3 years now, but after all this time, the grief remains. I miss my husband dearly and I am devastated that he isn't here anymore. I have now moved far away from everyone. I'm living in a different country now. I am happy, I guess. Things could be worse. I'd like to thank everyone who contributed to my initial post. I'm now in a better place for sure, but I still miss my husband every day. His smile, his laughter, his kindness. A lot has happened after my last post. Mainly, Marcus is now dead too. He was drunk, went for a drive, and drove himself into a tree. I was, and I am sort of happy about that, even though I guess I shouldn't. I have my suspicions that he aimed for a tree on purpose. Can't say for sure, but that's what I think. Anyway, I will never return to this account. Therapy has helped me, but not enough. I am scarred by what happened, and I'd like to spend the rest of my life away from this horrid thing. When I die, I'll be able to see my husband again. I hope he's waiting for me on the other side. Once again, thank you everyone. It's time for me to finally move forward. A user named Nickels on Girls said the following. I dated a guy for 4 years when I was 18 and just thought he was bi because he had experiences with men, and that was fine by me. But one night he dropped the bombshell on me that his uncle, who had tattooed me and I'd known for a few years at that point, used to him years ago. My BF was around 23 or 24 when he was telling me this and didn't think he'd been because he'd liked the way it felt and how well he was taught to perform oral and He had other major issues and I broke up with him for other reasons, but to this day I think about it. Sometimes I think about reporting it, but it's been over 20 years and would just be hearsay without any evidence. Sometimes I think about warning the family because he told me details I would never have known otherwise and they'd likely believe me, but it would bring a lot of drama. This whole story is just so messed up. There are things that I want to say, but due to the nature of the story, YouTube doesn't really like it if we're too explicit. But anyway, just tragic for both OP and her husband. This is definitely up there with some of the worst Reddit posts I've ever come across. This next post was made in the relationship advice subreddit in 2022 by a user named Mortalis Virgo. The post is titled, "My mother 62F wants to rekindle a relationship with me 33F after I discovered a family secret and I don't know if I should give her another chance." Throwaway account JIC, longtime lurker and first time poster. I never knew I would end up with a story worthy of posting, but here we are. Mostly looking for some advice here as I am at a loss. A little bit of background for you. I live in the US now and have for most of my life, but my family has deep roots in a culture that puts special emphasis on family ties, faithfulness, male children, and a successful career. I am sure some of you can read into that and realize that I break pretty much all of these. I have been estranged from my parents for most of my life. As a 17-year-old, I ran away from home and have been no/low contact ever since. Growing up was something of a nightmare. My father was pretty much hands-off, having been disappointed his eldest was a girl. He was actually willing to see how I turned out, since he was willing to bend gender norms in our culture for my mother and let her be in charge of raising me, as she has a very strong personality and likes to be in charge, something that will make many appearances in this story. To him, perhaps I would take after my mother. Spoiler alert, I don't really take after her in any way that he thought I would. My mother, perhaps making up for the lack of my father being in my life, never gave me a moment of privacy or an inch of slack. Everything about my life was shared and subsequently judged. Nothing was good enough for my mother and she never let anything go. I was too thin, looking like I'm gaining weight, my grades were too low, and then when they were higher, I wasn't participating in a sport and being lazy. And when I added sports and other extracurriculars and my grades dropped, I was right back to where I started. Too pale, too tan, too ugly, too much makeup, you get the idea. Nothing was good enough for her. And of course, my father was no help because he wanted a boy and he got me, and therefore my mother must be right and I must be a complete failure, right? Then when I was in elementary school, my mother had another child. Surprise, another daughter. Just what they wanted. Not. That being said, my father treated us completely the same. My preteen self was treated no better or worse than my child sister, and that continued as we aged. The same can't be said for my mother. As I'm sure it is not unusual for you readers to see, my sister was the golden child of us too. My mother kissed the ground she walked on. Well, not really, but you get the idea. To skip a bunch of emotional asides, I will cut to the chase for the breaking point that signified my running away from home. My sister died. We were close-ish, at least enough to be prepared to stay in contact with her even if I decided to go low contact with my parents, so this hit me really hard. It wasn't anyone's fault and I don't want to go too far into it, but it was a freak accident that happened on my 17th birthday. That being said, my father retreated even further away and my mother did blame me, despite my having nothing to do with the accident other than being born on the day it happened. Things got much worse after that. Nothing physical, but every time I talked to my mother after that day, we were screaming. My father didn't say a word to me. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore, and I ran to stay with a childhood friend of mine who was close enough to be my brother and continued going to school. My mother probably knew where I went, but made no effort to get in contact with me, not even calling or anything. If she didn't know where I was, it's not like she filed a missing persons report or anything. We didn't talk for almost 5 years after that. That was the no contact part of this. At that 5-year mark, my girlfriend at the time finally persuaded me to reach out, and so began the low contact part. Now, that's most of the background. The background covers 2 of the 4 cardinal family values: family ties and male children. 2 failures, right? Well, now we get into the other 2. Faithfulness and a successful career. Since we started low contact again, my parents have discovered what I do for a living, which honestly isn't much, at least in their eyes. Now, what does that mean, you might be asking? Well, I do odd jobs. I travel all over and take on clients who need a person with a varied skill set, mostly in business management. Sometimes this involves helping to start a business, turning a business into a franchise, or helping move a company overseas and set up a base in a new country. Lots of that kind of stuff. It's not really a job title with a neat little description, and the pay varies wildly depending on what's in my scope and how many random skills they need me to learn. I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. Of course, my ex-lawyer mother and surgeon father aren't fans of this. To me, I have had a very successful career. I'm happy with what I do, travel a ton, have learned a bunch of languages, have friends all over the globe, and I make a lot of money. A lot of money. With all the businesses I've worked with, I have plenty of friends who taught me about investments, and I've also made my money make me more money. I live very comfortably and work in bursts, which leaves me with a lot of free time. Now, my parents, who don't really understand what I do, despite how many times I've tried to tell them, don't see it the same way I do, and have made it very clear to me that their disappointment is strong. Quite very strong. Every time we talk, they start suggesting law or medical schools and assuring me they could get me a much better job for someone from this family, whatever that means. This recently ended up in a very special edition screaming match, with my father actually joining in the screaming as a special guest. I took off from that family dinner to one of my friend's houses and we got very wine drunk. She asked me why my mother hated me so much, so we decided to come up with the most ridiculous reasons as we got progressively drunker. This led my friend to jokingly say that maybe my mother hates me so much because she's not really my mother. I knew that exact scenario wouldn't be possible because there are pictures of me in the hospital room right after labor, but there's another very close possibility that stuck in my head for weeks after that. Eventually, it ate away at me enough that I did one of those ancestry DNA tests and realized why exactly my mother hates me so much. Faithfulness. According to my DNA or whatever, I have plenty of relatives on my mother's side and not a single one on my father's side. So she cheated on him and I was a beautiful reminder of her own failure. Yay me. I knew even then that she cheated because my parents tried for children for years before they had me and even had 2 miscarriages before having me, as was often hurled in my face during arguments. When I finally calmed down after this revelation, I took my mother out for lunch, showed her my evidence, and told her my findings, after which my mother broke down right in front of me. Now, remember when I said that my mother took the role of head of the family in place of my father, who, as the man of the house, would have traditionally taken on the head of the family role, and this only happened because of my mother's strong personality? Yeah, up until that point, I don't think I had ever seen my mother cry before in my life, and that's when I got a hell of a story. My mother actually apologized, though I don't think it was really directed toward me and more about the situation in general, and told me the man who is my bio dad, BD, was a one-night stand and she didn't even know his name. She had been in a really low place when she just happened to meet him, having just fought with her husband over their second miscarriage several months prior. My BD was charming, smooth, and as my mother put it, magical. She said it was the first time in many months that anyone had made her feel desirable and beautiful and not like a failure, which isn't surprising considering the pressure to have children young in my extended family/culture. This resulted in her sleeping with a stranger, something she just did to scratch an itch before returning to her life. When she found out she was pregnant with me, the thought that I wasn't my father's daughter didn't even cross her mind. In fact, she didn't have an inkling until I was old enough to really develop what she described as my BD's exact smile. This instilled a lot of fear in her that I was a product of her infidelity and was the start of her hatred toward me. After my sister was born, she again thought that perhaps things were fine because obviously she was capable of having children with her husband. Unfortunately for all of us, my sister passed and I started to resemble her one-night stand more and more the older I got, and my mother had nothing left but disgust for me. Of course, that was before I figured it out. It's been about a week since then, and I have decided I need help from people who are less biased than my personal friends because, at the end of my mother's story, she was crying and apologizing and even admitted that the person she really hated all these years was herself. She begged me not to tell my father and asked if I could ever forgive her and come back into the family, and I told her I had no idea what to say to that because I'd been dealing with this for so long for it to just come to a point like this. I don't know what I left out and have just sort of been rambling, so feel free to ask clarifying questions and whatnot, but I guess I just need to see what people think I should do. Should I keep it from my father? Should I try to get along with them now that my mother seems to have let go of some of her resentment now that the secret is out? I know my mother and have seen so many of her sides that I can really tell when she's being sincere or lying to me, and she did seem entirely sincere about trying to make amends for all she's done to me so far. So what should I do? TLDR, my mother was verbally abusive during my childhood, and it's been 16 years since I ran away from home. I have been low contact for 11 years. I recently discovered the root of her hatred toward me as a child was that she had a one-night stand and cheated on my dad, resulting in her pregnancy with me. Now that she's come clean, she wants another chance to have a relationship with me, as I am her only living daughter. Do I give her another chance? OP's mom is honestly despicable. The fact that she felt quote-unquote disgusted whenever she looked at OP when OP never even asked to be introduced into the world is so irritating. It's actually insane that this woman carried through with having a child via an affair and nobody figured it out. Personally, I wouldn't forgive someone like OP's mom, but then again, I'm not the person in this situation in the first place. Again, if you've been listening to the channel for a while now, you'll know I'm petty. So if I was OP, I would go through with telling the dad about the affair. To be quite frank, for all of the emotional and mental trauma that OP's mom has caused, she deserves this. A user named AnonMalon12 said, "Girl, this is a hard one. I go back and forth with this myself because it is hard when it's your family. But you're also allowed to have boundaries in your life about people regardless of who they are. And if they cross those boundaries, then you're allowed to do what you need to as a way to find peace from it. I think it's kind of ironic that men are so important in your culture since your father doesn't even act like one by letting your mom rule the roost. Also, if you had not discovered her infidelity, would she even be apologizing to you and trying to make things right? That's what gets me. Is her apology genuine or just her way of trying to keep you from telling your dad the truth?" Another user named Redditor with a bunch of numbers said the following: "This might be because I grew up with an emotionally and verbally abusive stepdad, but I think you should tell your dad. From how you are saying it, it doesn't really sound like your mother cared to make amends with you. She just doesn't want your dad to find out. And at this point in your life, if she doesn't want to talk to you after that, it wouldn't be the first time. I personally don't see a reason for you to go back to the family. Tell your dad and leave it at that. If they want to talk to you again, they will reach out." User Bry117 said, "The choice is fully yours, but here's the brass tacks. She made your life hell for her mistake and got away with it. She abused you, manipulated you, dragged you through life by your ankle, and told you to stop complaining about the dirt in your mouth because she fucked up. Now, you can give her a chance at redemption. Keep in mind that you are very aware she will probably fail. It probably hurt again, and you may just end up with no contact again. Me, I'm petty. What you have is lightning in a jar, and her name is written on it. I would go all out, scorched earth. I would absolutely detonate that nuke right in her face. Take all that evidence to your dad, her family, everyone. Make her stand there and watch as you pull her life apart, as you destroy everything she has ever known. Make her beg and plead, give her a little hope, and then squash it in her eyes so you can see the light go out as she realizes her mistake has finally caught up with her, and all the years she spent torturing you for something you had no control over at all only fueled the fire that now is consuming her. Make her realize that, slowly break her down on a level so far she begins to realize this is all her own fault. After all, she deserves nothing less. Or you could be a bigger person and forgive her. She doesn't deserve it. She won't be grateful for very long, and she certainly has no remorse for what she did to you.